Social media platforms such as TikTok and Instagram make finding almost anything possible. That increasingly includes people looking for help and community sharing or oversharing difficult emotions, suffering, and feelings of trauma. Is that good and useful? Or might it be toxic and an impediment to healing? With us to consider all of that in Fort Worth, Texas, Shannon Thomas. She's a certified clinical trauma specialist and author of Healing from Hidden Abuse. In Calgary, Alberta, Simone Saunders, trauma therapist and online content creator. And here in our studio, Huma Sadie, therapist and director at Cedarway Therapy. Huma, thank you for coming into our studio today, and to our friends in Points Beyond, we're glad you could join us on the agenda tonight as well. Let's just all make sure we understand what we're talking about. Trauma, Huma, is defined as what?
Trauma is something that is extremely upsetting or distressing as an experience, but it's important to note that what's traumatic for you might not be traumatic for me. And even more so, it's important to note is just because something is traumatic doesn't mean that you're having trauma symptoms as a result. So for example, if you've been in a serious traumatic car accident, you might not develop trauma symptoms as a result.
So it's a very personalized thing.
Yes, 100%.
Gotcha. Simone, maybe you could follow up on this term that we are hearing now, trauma dumping. What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So trauma dumping is any sort of unsolicited oversharing of trauma to people who don't necessarily consent to it.
Okay, and let's go on with this. We want to bring up a little graphic here that shows some of what you've just referred to. TikTok videos, for example, with hashtags that say trauma dump and trauma dumping have more than 20 million accumulated views. And if we go to Instagram, there are 4.1 million posts with the hashtag trauma and more than 415,000 with childhood trauma. Okay, Shannon, pick up the story there. How did social media become the dumping ground, if you will, for people sharing their traumatic incidents?
Well, it's a great question. It's kind of a phenomenon that's just come into play. I think it was in 2018 that the term was first coined, because somebody was sharing what was going on in their life and people hopped on, and rather than commenting about what the person had shared, they took it in a completely different direction and started sharing all kinds of really intimate aspects of trauma that they had experienced. And it has become difficult to be able to differentiate between what is real trauma happening for people and what sort of bandwagon trauma, where we're desensitizing the whole concept of experiencing really difficult things in life.
Simone, maybe you could pick up on that. Does this kind of trauma dumping, this sharing or in some cases oversharing, does it actually empower people in your experience?
Oftentimes I found that a lot of people can find camaraderie and find community in some of these pieces, because I think that the benefit of social media is that a lot of people have similar experiences, and they're being able to find other people who have some of those experiences and feel a little bit less isolated. So I think that I've seen kind of both sides to it, and I think that there is a lot of good in it as well.
Huma, what's your view on that?
I think it's important for particularly the consumers of the trauma dumping to be careful, as what trauma dumping really is, it's one-sided. It's somebody kind of dumping their trauma onto you, literally, and that can lead to consequences. So I think it's important that if you're following someone that does that regularly, you need to consider if that's healthy for you and it's okay for you to take that regularly.
I mean, the expression itself, trauma dumping,
Yes.
It sounds like a pejorative expression. It does not sound like a positive thing.
No, it's another word for toxic venting, essentially, right? So it's something that's one-sided, is often not consent of the other person receiving that information. So it may be helpful for the person doing it, but it might not be the best experience for the person receiving it.
Shannon, can you weigh in on that as well?
Yeah, I'm a trauma therapist, and I see clients still in full-time practice, and I don't find trauma dumping empowering. It's not leading to people getting help. What it's leading to is people hop online, and we're talking about people in a certain generation. I think we've got a generation gap happening as well. So we've got younger, generally, people going online, sharing really intimate, very, very difficult things that have happened to them. But then they're not leading it to anything that's empowering towards health, towards restoration, towards finding therapeutic resources. What we're seeing is people just saying what's happened to them, but not being empowered. Actually, we've watched people sobbing online, sobbing on these TikTok videos, and or dancing to common pop music, where now the traumatization has become really desensitized. So I'm actually on the other side, seeing clients all day long in private practice therapy, and I do not find that trauma dumping is at all empowering. There's a real difference between an education campaign, which is grounded, and here, this is what I've gone through, and here's how I got through it, and here's how you can get through it. Trauma dumping is actually quite the opposite.
Simone, in that case, would you urge people not to do it?
Yeah, I would think that I agree that there definitely needs to be some safety around your consumption of social media. What are you consuming? How is it impacting you? And around the things that you are disclosing online as well. I think that it's important to remember that, people have sensitivities, triggers, and it can be very difficult to hear. And vicarious trauma is also a thing. So just being mindful of how much you're sharing and what you are sharing.
Okay, mindful is one thing, but would you actually advise people that they should not do it because ultimately it is not helpful?
I think that that's a nuanced answer. I think that, again, I think it depends on the severity and exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, fair enough. Huma, how about this? I mean, if these are becoming, this trauma sharing, maybe oversharing in some cases, if you start setting it to music and you start dancing to it on TikTok or doing whatever people do on TikTok to give it kind of an artistic flair, is it turning into something else?
I think it can sometimes feel like it's becoming entertainment and to kind of garner more likes. And I think it's important for content creators to be aware of why they're sharing what they're sharing. Is it to the shock, the awe, to get more likes, or is it to actually work on healing or to help others? And I think that is really important to kind of go back to what is your intention about sharing this?
I don't mean this to sound like a naive question, but are there lots of people out there who do this just because they want to get likes? They just want the attention?
I think, unfortunately, yes. I do think there's a lot of good, positive content creators out there, but as with any, platform, anything that there are still some bad apples out there.
Simone, how about you? Can you say whether or not, in your experience, there's too much attention-seeking and not necessarily appropriate catharsis going on here?
I think that sometimes there is a lot of oversharing on social media, and that can definitely be harmful. And at times, unfortunately, it can be for likes. At other times, I think it's important, like Uma said, to really understand the intentionality behind sharing things.
Okay, let's bring up this quote here because we have somebody who has spoken to this. While trauma dumping may act as a cathartic release for some users, and online spaces can feel like a safe place to do so, experts warn it can also have detrimental effects for both the dumper and the dumpee. There's a term I haven't heard before, okay, dumpee. Okay, Shannon, you want to weigh in on that? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. And I think part of what the risks are is that with the algorithms of TikTok in particular, you will get into an echo chamber. So we've got young people, young adults, getting into this echo chamber of trauma. And, recently we talked about influencers and their intentionality of that. I happened to see a beachside influencer in a very, very beautiful home talking about not getting out of bed, being too depressed to get out of bed. Well, I can tell you somebody was getting out of bed because that house had to be paid for. And all of those expenses had to be paid for. And what I felt like in that moment is I felt manipulated. I felt like this person was buying into the sort of the modification or the money-making aspect of mental health. And, oh, I'm so depressed I can't get out of bed, while living in a multi-million-dollar home. And what's happening is that people, that are not living in multi-million-dollar homes and are not influencers are emulating this. I can't get out of bed. I'm too depressed. I'm too overwhelmed. I'm too traumatized. And now we're having a generation that's lacking in functionality. And I'm actually deeply concerned about where this is all going on TikTok with this particular generation.
Okay, but Simone, let me get you back in here and speak to the other side of the coin, where let's take at face value that there are good faith efforts out there by people who really want to make a difference not only in their own lives but in other people's lives as well. What does that kind of content look like, and how does it become constructive?
I think just having boundaries around it. So again, I think that goes back to intentionality. Why are you sharing what you're sharing? What are you following up with? Are you following up with resources? And I think that there's people who kind of share their everyday life, and some of that is including, experiences of depression or anxiety or what have you. And I think that that's something that can also sometimes be helpful too, because I think that depression and anxiety is a wide spectrum. And, you know, being rich or famous or whatever it is doesn't necessarily exclude you from those experiences.
No, in fact, quite the contrary sometimes. You wonder, you're surrounded by all this richness and yet you're still feeling miserable and depressed, and you wonder how that makes sense. Okay, I get you on that. Huma, I like your Instagram account. Muslim Trauma Therapist. Sums it all up right there.
Yes, it does.
Which raises for me the question of whether or not we have to look at some of this through a cultural lens, because there are presumably distinctions among different communities here. Fill us in on that.
So while there are many similarities between communities, I think what we know is there are a lot of significant nuances. And for me, one of the biggest shifts that I've seen on social media, and I've been in the field for many years, is the diversity of the voices from different racialized and cultural communities. Because when I was in school, everything I was taught and who I was taught by was from a Eurocentric perspective. And there are nuances, and not everyone has access to culturally and racially diverse content. And it really can help people feel seen and heard by getting that and knowing that they're not alone.
Fill in the blanks a little more on that, because, you know, some people watching this or listening to this may think, you know, depression is depression. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim or Christian or Jewish or whatever. Depression's depression. How is it different among different communities?
I think it can help people understand sometimes some of the reasons why. So maybe my family background is different than your family background, which can help inform things, whether it be intergenerational trauma that happens, to help people feel less odd or unique. I find that in social media, people can kind of see that they're not alone. There are other people that have had similar experiences to them, and that there is a way out of this. And having strategies and skills that are tweaked with cultural and spiritual nuance, I think, is very important.
Is that to say, one more follow-up for you, is that to say that you think you've got a better shot at helping, let's say, a Muslim 17-year-old girl dealing with the kinds of issues we've been discussing than somebody who's not a Muslim therapist?
I think it depends on the person, right? So I think for some clients, I really do think for them, it's probably better if they don't see a Muslim therapist. I think for others, it actually increases the likelihood that they're going to find a connection. And studies show the best predictor of treatment outcome is that connection you have between the therapist and the client. So for me, the biggest thing is there needs to be options out there for individuals. And what makes me really happy in the last several years is there's a lot more diverse therapists and options available, so people can have that choice.
And would most of the people that you treat be Muslims as well?
I would say the majority are currently in my private practice.
Majority are,
Yeah.
okay. Simone, same question to you. Do you think you've got a better shot at helping young black kids with whatever issues they're dealing with right now because you share that bond?
Yeah, I would also echo what Uma said. I think that really the relationship is the biggest piece. And I think if you're especially dealing with something like racial trauma, a lot of times it can be helpful to have a therapist that is a racialized person. I think it's also important to remember that, you know, a variety of therapists can be culturally responsive, but I think that connection to culture is really, really important and integral in the therapy journey, regardless of what you're choosing to work on.
Well, Shannon, I should get you to weigh in on that as well. Is that to say, Shannon, that you think you may not have as good a shot at Simone as Simone would in dealing with, yet, let's say, a young 17-year-old black girl who's dealing with issues?
Well, I think it really depends on what the client needs. You know, we come from a client-centered perspective. And if the client needs somebody that is going to understand certain aspects of their culture, certain aspects of how family dynamics work within the community, then I think that's what we're going to go with. We're going to go with what the client needs. For me, I see a wide range of clients from a variety of different backgrounds, different races, different ethnicities, demographics, because I specialize in healing from hidden abuse, which is a psychological abuse, a trauma. And having a trauma-informed therapist who understands the hidden abuse aspects, that cuts across a lot of different demographics. And so they want to come to someone who's going to understand the type of abuse that isn't typically talked about. So I do see a wide range of clients, but it's really about what they need. I literally asked the client the other day, am I what you need, or do you want assistance to help to find someone who fits more of what you're looking for and what your needs are at this time? And they were really honest about it, and we worked together to find what was the best fit.
Okay, you've opened that door, so I'm going to go through it. That person that you've just described, obviously, don't give us any name or anything like that,
No.
but in terms of other identifying factors, what cultural background were they, what community were they from, that kind of thing?
Similar background as far as a culture, similar background of ethnicity. But what was different was that their trauma was from a parent, and I'm about that parent's age. And so I asked this individual, am I the right therapist? Or is there going to be some difficulty in being that I'm the same gender, I'm around the same age? Would you prefer to work with a younger therapist that you would relate to in sort of a different, maybe subconscious way? And actually, the choice was no, to go ahead and to stay working with someone that is of my age, but can then work through what was needed to work through from a trauma perspective, but from a voice of someone who is in their early 50s.
So they were, at the end of the day, they were okay with you being the person.
Yes, but if they weren't, that was okay too, because we really want people to be in a spot that's right for them. And I wanted to open that space for that individual to be honest with what they needed.
Okay. Simone, can you take us through some of your clientele? What kinds of backgrounds do they come from?
Yeah, I would say that primarily the population that we see at my practice is, I would say, probably between 80 and 85% racialized folks.
And do you feel sort of particularly able to speak to and connect with that group of people because you share that common bond?
Yeah, I definitely think that some of the experiences that you have as a racialized person, those are experiences that you're able to share with other racialized people in a special way. Is that always what people are going to need? Absolutely not. But I think that sometimes when that is what you need, there is that special bond there.
And what about the circumstance that Shannon just described? Let's say the person in question might be an older sister who's around your age and who knows, may even look a bit like you. Do you find yourself in that set of circumstances where you might not be the right person?
Yeah, I think there's definitely always clients that will come and then it just might not be the right fit. And I think it's your job as a professional to open up that conversation, make sure that the client feels comfortable enough to talk with you about those things, and then refer them to whoever the best person is or work on whatever relationship, balance issues that the room might be at the time.
Huma, can you tell us whether you think this generation of young people who are, as they say, digital natives as opposed to digital immigrants, right? The iPhone has been a feature of their lives from as far back as they can remember. Are they particularly susceptible to, well, I don't know if the director can catch this shot, but there's a shot on the big wall behind us here. There it is, right there. I mean, I've seen that image 100 times on the subway, among friends of my daughter. Is this generation particularly susceptible to all of this because they're digital natives?
I think what's really important is they may be more susceptible. That does not need to be the full story, though. I think there's a lot of education that can happen around this by their caregivers, their parents, the schools, in terms of what are appropriate boundaries to have with social media, with our phones, because it has in many ways also opened up many more opportunities, it has reduced barriers. So while COVID has been horrible in many ways, it has actually reduced barriers to accessing treatment or mental health content on social media. So while there is a lot of bad parts of, being a digital, nomad, there's also a lot of positive aspects. And I think just working with the educational piece is really important for this generation.
You're a mother?
Yes, I am.
How many kids you got?
3.
How old are they?
16, 13, and 10.
Oh, they are in the
Yes,
absolute
they're right in there.
sweet and or miserable spot
Yes.
of everything that we're talking about here. All right, how do you handle all this?
I actually think it's really important as a parent that I am on social media because it's very hard to help them navigate this, go through boundaries, and have those conversations that are both serious as well as lighthearted without me being on social media. So I do think for me as a parent, it is important to kind of be there in it with them.
Do you monitor what they send out and take in?
I do. I do at this age still have access to their social media accounts.
Do they know that?
Yes, they do.
What do they think about that?
They knew that was part of the arrangement when they were able to get this, and that this is not about trust. It is really around helping them navigate what is out there, making sure what comes in at them, they're able to navigate, and having conversations about that.
Now, your 2 older ones, I would think in particular right now, are especially susceptible to all of the dangers that we're talking about, because that's the age, right? They're at the age, and they no doubt have friends who are going through
Yes.
a lot of these difficulties right now. Do you have enough hours in the day to stay on top of all this? I mean, it's a fire hose of stuff coming at you.
I will say it is very difficult to be on top of it, and I think as parents and as caregivers, we need to understand is we can't always be there right in the moment with them. But what we can do is do our best to help them navigate and having that door open for them to come to us or other caregivers or adults that are in their lives so they feel comfortable coming to individuals to ask those questions about, is this okay? What about this content? Is this trauma dumping? Is that normal? What's going on to have that?
Shannon, how personal does this get for you?
Yeah, it gets very personal because as a Gen Zer, or I'm a Gen Xer. I'm raising a Gen Zer who is in their late teens and early 20s, and I actually have a different perspective. I think that when it comes to TikTok, the voices of their peers are very much overshadowing the voices of what's happening at home, and that's not just a personal experience. I think that's what I'm seeing from a lot of my clients as well, and what I'm hearing among mom friends is that a lot of these youth are now raising each other in some ways because our voices as parents can be a little bit overdrawn or outshadowed by a lot of the voices that are happening online. They're going to TikTok as a Google. When they're wanting to learn new things, they're TikToking and seeing different videos from people giving them opinions. And so what's happening is a lot of times what's going on at home is not what's raising a lot of children when it comes to the different foundations that are happening once we get into the social kind of natives and social nomads no more, that they are truly there living it. And those are the voices that are overriding a lot of what's happening within their families and generations of families.
I think we should see some of what we're talking about here. And we just happen to have some of Simone's work standing by. So Simone, we're going to take a look at some of what you've put out there and then we'll come back and chat. Mr. Director, if you would.
The message here is not to normalize unhealthy boundaries or controlling behavior just based off of culture. The message is to understand that culture plays a large role in your ability to set what is typically considered healthy boundaries. Once you're able to understand the nuance that comes with being a racialized person, then you can look at solutions that will be helpful for you based on your specific situation.
Okay, Simone, tell us why you put that out there.
Yeah, so that video, I believe, was in response to a video that I stitched from another creator. And the other creator essentially was talking about how, because of her, cultural identity, she had different boundaries, so to speak, with her family, which a lot of, Western or European, from a European perspective, might be too controlling or too kind of too helicoptery, so to speak. And so I was just talking about the fact that, in a lot of different cultures, family dynamics will look different. And I think that it's important to remember that and important to decide for yourself, okay, in terms of my own cultural identity, I don't necessarily have to take kind of westernized ideas and say like, okay, I'm going to cut my parents off or whatever that advice might look like. It might just look like, okay, how do I feel comfortable in this dynamic, knowing the cultural pieces that are really important to me and really important in my family dynamic.
And what kind of response did you get to the video?
I got a lot of responses from racialized people saying that that really resonates with them. They really agree. It's really difficult sometimes to take some of the mainstream advice and apply it to their own cultural contexts.
I presume you got some critical reaction as well?
Oh, absolutely.
And what did that look like?
I think that there were people that were saying that the video that I had stitched, that's abusive, that's toxic, that's this and that. And while I can totally understand and empathize that from a perspective where you haven't experienced a lot of that cultural nuance, it might definitely feel that way. But I think, again, it's really important to understand that coming from a cultural background, you really have to understand what those boundaries might look like, and it might look a little bit different for people, and that's okay.
Simone, do you ever get concerned that in your good faith attempt to put education and information out there, in effect, all you do is raise a red flag to all of the haters and it defeats the purpose at the end of the day?
No, not really, honestly, because I think, first of all, I've gotten a lot of great feedback on it. And I think that for me, a large part of my goal is, destigmatizing BIPOC mental health. And I think that in having a lot of these conversations, that's contributing to that, because these conversations are things that we don't necessarily have in our communities because mental health is so stigmatized in a lot of racialized communities.
Huma, last word to you on this. Are we at a point yet where social media can replace therapy?
Definitely not. I think there's benefits when it comes to social media and mental health content. Education is power, and not everyone has access to this type of information and weren't raised with learning that. However, therapy is completely different. It's an individual relationship that you have that's very special with somebody that's built on trust and intimacy. That's different than what you have with your family and your friends, and is nourished over time. It should be a space where that client should be able to tell their therapist anything and do so without judgment. And they're able to work on individualized goals, to work on things that they want to work on improving about themselves.
Well, I want to thank the three of you for joining us on TVO tonight. This was most illuminating. Shannon Thomas in Fort Worth, Texas, Simone Saunders in Calgary, Alberta, Huma Sadie here in our studio in Toronto. Thank you very much, you three. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.